good. Thank you so much for joining us. She is the managing director at the Rhode Island Black Heritage Society. So today we are honoring and celebrating Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So we're going to have a discussion about that. We're going to chat about a couple ways that the Heritage Society is moving forward and celebrating and honoring his legacy. So we'll talk about that and a few other things you're doing. We have events happening Black History Month for February, and then a big event coming up in March as well.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what the Black Heritage Society is doing in Rhode Island to help continue Dr. King's legacy.
Well, I like the fact that you keep saying moving forward. That is our slogan now. It's looking back, moving forward. And right now we're working on a National Park Service grant for civil rights in Rhode Island in the 20th century. So we're exactly looking at that time period where Dr. King was organizing the marches and everything that was going on in the South. We're researching what was going on in Rhode Island at that time. And looking at the important ways that people here were moving forward with the struggle, including those people that became freedom riders and went down to the South.
I think that's so fascinating. Talk to me just a little bit about this grant that you received and what will be happening, what you're looking into, and so far what you found.
Well, it's very exciting. It's a partnership. We've partnered with Rhode Island Historical Society and with the Rhode Island, I always get this wrong, Historic Preservation Commission, and then of course Rhode Island Black Heritage Society. And it's a 3-part grant. We are doing oral histories on those that are alive today, because we don't want to wait till we lose it. And having the oral histories collect all the information of the things that they were doing, the people they knew, the places where people met, what was the important issues in Rhode Island at that time. And then the second part, from those oral histories, we start to identify sites and locations in Rhode Island that were important to the civil rights movement. Places where people were meeting, sit-ins, which a lot of people don't know there were sit-ins in Rhode Island, and all the activities that were going on. And then the third part of it is to create lesson plans that will become part of a curriculum of African American history in Rhode Island.
I think this is so fascinating and so neat and such an important part of not only Rhode Island history but American history as well. So let's talk a little bit about this. As we look at Martin Luther King Day in Rhode Island, a lot of attention, you think of the civil rights movement, was focused on the South, and that's what you were saying. But stuff was happening in Rhode Island at that time. And you just mentioned you're getting part of that oral history. That's what you're collecting, that data, because people were here and they might not be here for that much longer.
Right.
Talk to me a little bit about, and you mentioned a couple things, talk to me about what you've learned so far. Have you heard any stories, or have you collected any stories, or people that are working on this, have you heard any stories that people might not have known about or that maybe have caught your ear?
Well, I think that it's important to note that what was going on in the South and the issues that were important there weren't necessarily the same issues that were going on in Rhode Island. Rhode Island has a long history of African American participation in almost every aspect of life. So it wasn't so much not being able to sit at the front of the bus, or it wasn't those types of issues so much, but things like fair housing, equal rights in jobs, equal pay. Those were the kinds of things that they were struggling for. So I think that it's a little bit surprising, particularly having grown up with the traditional types of things that we heard in school. We, didn't learn about Northern slavery. We didn't learn about the Northern struggles. It was always about the South. And so stopping and listening to people talking about, not being able to go to a certain beach, for example, is surprising to me because, one, we're in the North, and was that really happening? So I think a lot of people don't think about that. And they don't think about people fighting and struggling in Rhode Island for their own equal rights. And I don't mean just African Americans, but I mean that is the predominant group that had to struggle and really had to make a life for themselves and their families and their communities.
You wrote a guest mindsetter for GoLocal Prov just about a year ago now, and you talked about how Black history is important in Rhode Island. And I think you just kind of mentioned that, is learning these issues that people They fought for these civil rights in Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe children didn't learn about them growing up. They didn't know about them, not having access to certain beaches or being able to go to certain places. And it's because we didn't know about them growing up. Talk to us about why that history and that heritage is important to learn, and kids need to know about this stuff. And everybody should know about this stuff, to be honest with you.
Well, I'm going to deviate a little bit from what
Yeah.
you asked, because I'm not sure that it's important to know the struggle was there.
Okay.
What I do feel is really important for them to know is the creative survival, the long history. And when I say long, I'm talking about early 1700s. I'm talking about people who came over but immediately began looking for a better life in spite of their condition. And that is something that I think that we have tried to impress upon people. It was their condition. They weren't slaves, they were enslaved. It's a totally different mindset. And they had that mindset. They came here, they struggled, but they always looked forward, always looking to better themselves, better their lives, better their community. There was a very strong sense of community from, the Free African Union Society was established in 1780.
Wow.
So it's, as I said, a very long history of people trying to improve themselves. It's interesting that, today on Martin Luther King Day, every place I went, and still to go yet, every speaker would have a quote from Dr. King. And it was always, about the moving forward with the struggle, staying focused. My favorite one of Dr. King's is one that says that only in darkness do you see the stars. And I think that in Rhode Island, in spite of what's going on today and in spite of the troubles that might be going on, people not expressing very nice views sometimes, it's important to remember those stars in Rhode Island. And Rhode Island history is full of them. We have men and women, Duchess Quamino in the colonial era. We have, George Downing, who was a very well-known entrepreneur. Mahlon Van Horn, our first Rhode Island black legislator, who went on to become Consul General in the Danish West Indies. These are people that we should be looking at and looking up to, but also modeling a lot of our behaviors today, because a lot of what they were going through then, unfortunately, has recycled and is back today.
Which is why it's always good to learn about your history.
Absolutely.
Always good to learn about and understand your history. Let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned the oral histories and incorporating lesson plans for African American curriculum. When do you think that will be established?
Good question.
Not sure.
I think we've all been waiting to find out when that's going to happen. It's already been passed into law.
Yeah.
The 1696 Commission moved forward with that, and it was signed into law that there would be African American curriculums for K through 12. I think they're focusing, middle school was the first focus. Funding for curriculum development still hasn't come through, but the Black Heritage Society has decided to move forward, and everything that we do, whether it's the civil rights research, colonial era research, anything that we're doing, we're planning on having lesson plans created, so that when we do have that opportunity to put it all together and get it into the schools, there will already be a body of work for them to work with.
Amazing.
Rather than just sitting back and waiting for somebody to do it.
I think that's important. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Black History Month that's coming up. You have some events that are happening. February 28th, there's a commemoration breakfast, and you have a couple keynote speakers. Also, you are honoring someone very special within our community. Talk to us a little bit about what's happening.
The February 28th breakfast is actually a unique partnership, although not a surprising one. It's Opportunities Industrialization Center of Rhode Island and the Rhode Island Black Heritage Society have come together to do this commemorative breakfast. And we wanted to honor Clifford J. Montero, who is well known in Rhode Island, has over 60 years, and I would probably need a full hour here to tell you everything that man has done. Briefly, though, he's a former president of the Providence NAACP. He was the main founder of OIC of Rhode Island. He's been involved in, I think I see him everywhere, every historical presentation, everything we do. He was involved with he was a fair housing advocate. So he's, in this whole looking back, moving forward, he is probably the one person I could say that I'm most excited about honoring. So he's the civil rights honoree. And then we have our keynote speaker is Travis McGreedy, who's the CEO of the Massachusetts Life Sciences Center. So talk about looking forward.
Love it.
We're very excited to have the two of them there.
I think that'll be an excellent celebration. So that again is on February 28th if you're interested. And then of course,
But I have to say,
yeah,
tickets are on sale on Rhode Island BlackHeritage.org.
get them now.
And next week they'll be available on Eventbrite.
Perfect. So you can get them now, and we'll put a link, of course, to the
Thank you.
website as well. And then coming up, the big event, March 31st, always an excellent time.
Yes, March 31st is our annual Black Heritage Gala. It's a ball that has been going on for probably as many years, almost 40 years now. And it was always a big dress-up event. It was very exciting, and we're bringing that back. It kind of dwindled down to a reception because everybody was so busy with jobs and everything. Now I think people are looking for that dress-up event again. We did it last year. Our co-chair, Don Mays, was also involved last year, and they had capoeira dancers and a DJ and exhibits. It was a very good time. So we'll be there March 31st at the Omni Providence, and the tickets will be on sale in 2 weeks.
Okay, so 2 weeks. You have 2 weeks to mark it on your calendar. And again, the date is March 31st. Talk to me, you mentioned, and we'll let you go because I know you have more events to go to, and you were at events earlier today. Talk to us. This is, again, Martin Luther King Day, as many people know, and you've been at events. What's the mood like? What's the feeling been like today as you've been to these events and you continue going today?
I want to say that it's very positive, very hopeful, but more than anything, very determined. I think that, as I said, only in darkness you see the stars, and right now you have some difficult things going on in the world and in the country. People could easily become depressed or, decide that it wasn't worth it, but the opposite, I think, is happening. People are, gearing up. It's more of an excitement to get out and get working again, being very involved with the community. One thing I'm very gratified about is that we have very strong community in Rhode Island and very well-attended events by all people. I mean, one of the things that was highlighted this morning was the diversity of the group. This isn't a single, how can I put it? It's not that it's separate communities. We are all one community.
It's one thing I do really enjoy about being in Rhode Island is that there is quite a bit of diversity here.
There is.
And if you choose to be involved, then you can be involved. There's numerous ways to be involved and be active in the community.
Well, I'm putting my historical hat on again. That goes back. It goes way back with Rhode Island being a diverse community. More so in Newport, I think, than Providence. Providence became later, but in the very early days, in the colonial days, you had a lot of people working together. You had free Africans at a very early date, and they became very involved through the churches and through civic organizations.
See, there's always a reason.
Yes, there is.
There's always a historical foundation, which is why history is so fascinating. It's great to have you here, Soni. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for this conversation today. Of course, we will have links to the Rhode Island Black Heritage Society on our website, so you can get more information on the grant, what they're doing, and then, of course, links to those events coming up soon. So we're wrapping up here on GoLocal Live. I'm Molly O'Brien. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we will see you tomorrow. And we will see you tomorrow. And we will see you tomorrow. And we will see you tomorrow.